A new day, a new report. Greetings to all of you, dear viewers from the Pioneer channel, which keeps its finger on the pulse of the Russia-Ukraine war. In a moment, we will analyze the latest developments in the war with a map. According to the latest reports, the front line is very active. We are witnessing that the intensity is especially intense on three fronts: Kherson, Donetsk, and Bakhmut front line. There is also a significant increase in the intensity on the Bakhmut front line, which we have characterized as calm in recent days. As you may recall, we shared our impressions about the caution of the Ukrainian army here in the past days. We see that Russian pressure on the Ukrainian army is increasing. This pressure is especially seen around the Donetsk front line. The Russian army has increased its attacks to weaken the Ukrainian army's advance on the Kherson front line. The expected situation here is that the Ukrainian army will transfer its units in Kherson to other front lines. So will this happen? Let's take a look at the developments together. As the Pioneer team, we continue to bring the Russia-Ukraine war to your screens. Don't forget to subscribe to our channel and turn on notifications so as not to miss our daily map reports and reports on the agenda. You can also support me and my team by using the super thanks button below the video. Let's start if you're ready, the Pioneer reports. Let's start by looking at the latest developments on the Bakhmut front line. As you know, on this front line, the Ukrainian army has made significant gains during their counteroffensives. However, as we often mention in our reports, it is very important not only to achieve gains, but also to keep them. When we look at it, we see that the Ukrainian armed forces have gained important positions in Klishchivka and Andriivka south of Bakhmut city center during the counteroffensives. These important positions are under intense Russian offensive activity. Everything in the world is in a cycle. The important thing is to control the cycle. So far, we see that the Ukrainian armed forces are in control of the cycle south of Bakhmut. There are intensive attacks by the Russian armed forces in the region. These attacks need to be softened. However, such a softening also requires a tactical retreat. When we look at the latest reports, we see that the Ukrainian army has made tactical withdrawals around Klishchivka. However, we need to mention the following details immediately. The Ukrainian armed forces are still in control of the hilly areas around Klishchivka, which make the defense strong in the region. This means the following: Ukrainian armed forces still have the capacity to defend and advance in the region. The potential to draw the Russian army into a trap is also quite high. In other words, the seizure of the positions by the Russian army may be part of a plan. We have already mentioned that the Ukrainian army has made a tactical retreat. The fact that the strategic hills are still under the control of the Ukrainian armed forces clearly shows that the disadvantageous situation of the Russian army continues. Let us continue with the artillery activity in the region. According to the latest reports, Russian artillery units targeted Ukrainian armed forces positions in Andriivka, Ivanivsky, and Budanovka, Fedorivka, Prizotny, Vasilyev, Vimka, and Spronoy. In turn, artillery units of the Ukrainian armed forces targeted Russian positions east of Klishchivka and Andriivka in Ozerinivka. Now we continue our daily map reports with the Donetsk front line, which is another front line where the pressure of the Russian army continues. On the Donetsk front line, Russian troops carried out intense attacks in the direction of Novomikhailovka. Especially in this region, Russian long-range artillery is working quite intensively here. Ukrainian armed forces are under intense pressure. There should be more breakthrough operations in this area. If the positions of the Russian army are not dispersed here, the pressure will increase even more. We believe that the artillery units of the Ukrainian army are active in this area, but not enough. We also see that the Russian armed forces have launched attacks in Mariinka and near Povormovskoye. However, we see that these attacks were largely unsuccessful. As we mentioned, there are intense attacks by the Russian army. However, the Ukrainian defense is also very resilient. We have often stated in our previous reports that there is a very strong defense line formed by the Ukrainian armed forces. However, nothing is eternal. Therefore, this region needs to be constantly fortified. According to the information we have received from local sources, there is a high probability that Abrams tanks will be deployed here in a short time. If Abrams tanks are deployed in this area, Russian attacks can be completely stopped. Similar actions by the Russian armed forces at the Yasinovata fork in Avdiivka led to an advance. Insignificant in depth, but tactically important, the Ukrainian armed forces have problems here in the industrial zones. Russian attacks on the Avdiivka coke factory were repulsed by the Ukrainian troops. Russian attacks on Stepnoe were also repulsed by the Ukrainian defense forces. Russian artillery and aviation have also been very active in the region in recent days. Let's talk about artillery activity in the region. According to the latest reports, artillery units of the Russian armed forces targeted Ukrainian armed forces positions in Severnoe, Tonenka, Orbolovka, Karminka, New York, and Yuzhnoye. In turn, the Ukrainian armed forces targeted positions under the control of the Russian armed forces in Donetsk, Opitny, Kamenka, the village of Krasnogorovka, and Horlivka. Yes, let's continue our daily map reports by analyzing the latest developments on the Kherson front line. The Kherson crisis is deepening day by day for the Russian army. According to the reports, the Ukrainian army's artillery activity has increased along the Kherson front line. In fact, both armies are retaliating against each other. When the Russian army increases its attacks on the Donetsk front line, the Ukrainian army responds on the Kherson front line. There is also the opposite situation. When the Ukrainian army increases the intensity of attacks on the Kherson front line, the Russian army increases the intensity of attacks on the Donetsk front line. According to the latest reports, the Russian armed forces attacked Ukrainian Marines in the forest belt in Krinky after the shelling. However, Ukrainian positions in the area are still resistant. The attacks of the Russian army were successfully repelled by the Ukrainian Marines. On the other hand, the Ukrainian army intensified its offensive in the direction of Krinky. As you may recall, the Ukrainian army wants to reach a strategic crossroad here. If the crossroad is reached, the situation will change completely. Let's talk about artillery activity in the area. Russian artillery has increased its activity compared to the past days. However, there is a situation like this. This activity is still not enough. According to the latest reports, Russian artillery units targeted Ukrainian positions in Kherson, Antoniivka, and Dutchany. In contrast, Ukrainian artillery units targeted positions of the Russian armed forces in Alyoshki, Poima, Pechanovka, Podstepnoe, Kazakh camps, Krusunka, Depronanyani, Novaya, Kakhovka, and Bolshaya Leptika. What do you think? How should the Ukrainian advance on the Kherson front line be assessed? Do you think the Ukrainian army will be able to stop the Russian offensive on the Donetsk front line? Let me know in the comments. I read and care about all your comments.